Well, Sean Payton is stepping down as the Saints coach. The Saints will make that official announcement later this afternoon. And look, in the last few days, it started as a Sean Payton has gone unusually silent this offseason. It became Sean Payton is mulling the possibility of retirement. And then as of yesterday, when Sean Payton was back at the Saints facility but made no announcement, then you could really see writing on the wall. Sean Payton is stepping away. Now, our understanding is that this is not to take another coaching job, but just that after 16 years of running the Saints organization, and if you know anything about Sean Payton, he is an intense worker, and that is an understatement. And the hours and the time he puts into it, especially this past season. It was 1 week longer. The Saints, of course, hit by Hurricane Ida, had to go to Dallas, hit by a crazy rash of injuries. He has to play 4 different quarterbacks. He doesn't have his starting tackles. It was a frustrating, long, COVID-filled season. We had heard by the end of the year that Payton was noticeably more burnt out than he had ever been before. And once this dragged out that extra day yesterday, the writing was sort of on the wall. Sean Payton is going to step down. The official announcement is coming, and he will be retiring from coaching. Now, I would suspect Payton is 58 years old. I would suspect that after a few years away that he would come back. Again, we don't think it's to take another job. If he would take another job, because he is still under contract with the Saints would get significant compensation from that team. The longer that would drag out, the less compensation the Saints would get. And if it's after the 3-year contract is up, there would be none. But the greatest era of Saints football, 16 years of Sean Payton. And I do want to say this, Karen, that the run was not over. In the last 5 years, from 2017 to 2022, the Saints have the second best record in the NFL, behind only the Kansas City Chiefs. This was not a franchise on the decline. This was a franchise that over the last 5 years is playing at an elite level. But Sean Payton, after this season, wanted time away, obviously felt like he needed time away, and is stepping away as the Saints head coach.
Well, you said it. I mean, he's the winningest coach in Saints history, and who among us don't think of him as sort of synonymous with the rebirth of the city post-Katrina? That '09 Super Bowl is, you can't even say it without getting chills. And so we certainly all wish him the best. Over the last few days, you've talked about this. You've said that there were rumblings that this might happen. It in fact is happening. You also mentioned that perhaps he might have a future in TV. I think right now we should ask Sean Payton, if you're watching, if you'll join us here at WWL. But are you hearing anything about that?
Well, look, and you saw this in the last few years, and I think this is honestly more so since about 2018. You would see Payton immediately after the season, when the NFL is still hot and they were still in the playoffs, he would be on the ESPN studio shows, the NFL network studio shows. He was doing podcasts, and he seemed to really enjoy it. First of all, I'll say this. When he wants to, he can break down football in a way that is so entertaining and interesting to listen to. Now, he often didn't want to, as the coach of the Saints. He didn't want to go away training.
Doug, do we have you? All right. I'm sure headed either to Saints camp or here at Channel 4. Breaking the news this afternoon that Saints head coach Sean Payton will be stepping down this afternoon. Officially, we are expecting an announcement coming from the Saints organization soon, but sources have confirmed from us that Saints head coach Sean Payton stepping down after 16 phenomenal years. Doug, are you with us again?
Yes, I am actually pulling into the Channel 4 parking lot. Ironically enough, we were in a meeting to pick the next Saints Hall of Famers when the news broke, and I left the meeting before we actually voted. But yes, and look, and I do want to say, yes, Sean Payton will go down. Well, obviously, he's the greatest coach in Saints history, and one of the great NFL coaches of the modern era. And as an offensive play caller, play designer, offensive mind, one of the most innovative coaches of this generation. The Saints Super Bowl season of 2009, he started using 3 running backs to do different roles. Pierre Thomas, Mike Bell, and Reggie Bush with different roles. A couple years later, every NFL team was using multiple running backs in different roles. You've seen what he's done with Taysom Hill in the last 2 or 3 years. Now, about half of the NFL teams are putting in Taysom Hill copy packages. Sean Payton has been, one of the great coaches. Karen, I think you said it best. After 16 years, and I can tell you, covering the team this past year was exhausting, and I feel about 1/1000th of the exhaustion that I'm sure Sean Payton felt trying to design an offense with no tackles and no quarterback at some point. So I certainly get his exhaustion and needing a break. I think that's understandable. And look, my takeaway right this minute is we have seen some of the greatest, most innovative, fun football between he and Drew Brees. They brought an era of Saints football that was unbelievably entertaining and fun to watch. And what they did for the city in the immediate aftermath of Katrina, they made New Orleans feel like winners again in a way that you wouldn't think a football team could do that, but they sure did. And for me, 100% of my recall of Sean Payton's era in New Orleans is going to be 100% positive in the same way that it was with Drew Brees.
Oh, my goodness. I think we all feel the same way. He is the personification of resilience and strength and New Orleans. And I think you're right. We all stood taller after Katrina when those Saints went in there. And I can think of the U2 song going on. And, he led us back to where we are right now. And he was going to continue to lead us. But we wish him the very best. Doug, I know you're in the parking lot. We're going to give you a moment to come on inside. Join me on set. And in the meantime, we're going to welcome, we've got Nick Underhill, I believe, via Zoom, our Saints analyst. Nick, thank you for joining us. Your thoughts on this monumentous day for him?
Yeah, this is a franchise-altering day for the Saints. Last year, Drew Brees steps away. This year, Sean Payton is now stepping away. So you take the 2 iconic images of this team, and they're gone within a year. So this is a definite whole new era for the Saints. And I can't say this is necessarily a surprise for the team. This has been lingering in the air for a little bit, probably a couple weeks. Even into the season, there were some whispers coming that Sean was a little bit worn out, that he seemed a little bit different coaching, and people wondered what he was going to do. The initial thought was he was going to go away after the season, recharge his batteries, come back and resume and be at the helm of the team. But obviously that is not how things have worked out. And now the team is in the biggest stage of transition it's been in since, that after that 2005 season. So this is a monumentous day for this franchise.
Well, you certainly have great and well-placed sources because you were among those two to break it if you didn't break it yourself. So we appreciate that, and we appreciate your time. Now looking forward in terms of what is in store for his future, we heard Doug talking about how adept he is behind the microphone, and we've heard the rumblings that maybe there's a TV career in store for him. We know that Drew Brees landed at NBC. Do you think there's a chance that maybe Drew or one of his former players may be trying to recruit him?
I've been told that both Fox and Amazon are among the networks that made overtures to him during the season, and they started reaching out to him during that second half of the season to see if he was interested in leaving and seeing if they could maybe even just pull him off the sidelines. I don't necessarily think that's what this decision was entirely based on. I think that Sean was a little bit worn out. And look, just the grind of going back to 2017, you have the Minneapolis Miracle, you have the Rams game. It felt like everything they were doing right, and still it wasn't enough to get over the hump. So I think it's just a culmination of everything. And then this last season itself just being an extreme grind. And look, having the energy to kind of start over post Brees and rebuild everything, the weight of that probably was just a little bit too much for him to keep going and try to do it again. But I do think that there is a good chance that we see him in television. As Doug mentioned, he's outstanding at that. And he has a knack for just explaining complex concepts in a very relatable way that people can understand it, they can digest it, they can learn from it. And that would be a tremendous asset for some TV
Right.
network.
It's like a surgeon being able to explain medical terms in layman's terms. They're worth their weight in gold. Let me ask you this. What does this do for the clout of Dennis Allen now?
I think he's probably at the forefront of the guys that they try to bring in and give that job to. Obviously, I think they need to go through a process and interview a lot of people and make sure that he is the guy that would be the right one to take over. But I think he's definitely the leader. If you had to lay out the candidates right now, he's getting interest from other teams around the league. He's actually interviewing with the Chicago Bears today. So it's probably good that Sean made this decision so that Dennis can have all the information he needs to make his own decision if the Saints is a possibility for him. But I would expect them to cast the net and bring in a lot of people, interview them, and just make sure that is a path that they want to go forward with. But the thing with Dennis Allen is that I think you can keep the staff together and you wouldn't have to blow everything up and start over. And the Saints aren't in this position of needing a new coach because they were a horrible team that couldn't succeed. It's just their coach stepped away. And I think running it back with the guys that are in the building, they could be right back in the mix next year if they make a couple good moves in free agency.
Given the autonomy with which he kind of ran the Saints and his level of clout within the organization and his wonderful relationship with Mrs. Benson, how much of a role do you think he may play in choosing his own successor?
I'm sure that they'll definitely listen to what he has to say, Sean. I mean, like you said, his voice carries tremendous weight in that building. And I think that they've probably already talked about this, and that was probably part of the process the last few days. And the timing of it with Dennis Allen interviewing in Chicago today, I'm sure that's not a coincidence that Sean decided to make his decision now so that the team can move forward and go through their process and everything. But I'm sure he'll be consulting on that. He'll be sharing his opinion, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're checking with him throughout this process just to kind of get his thoughts on various candidates if they do decide to look beyond Dennis Allen.
Okay, what do you think is his legacy? If you were to sum it up, let me make it tough. If you were to sum it up in a word, what would you say?
I would say relevancy. And before Sean Payton, this team wasn't very often relevant. And with Sean Payton, you were guaranteed to be relevant every single season. There was a floor on how low things could go, and it was a pretty high floor. And I think Sean just turned everything around for this team in a way that I don't think many people could have. And he was the perfect guy at the perfect time. And what he's done for this team it's going to be tough to replace. And, moving forward, I think that they have a good structure. The ownership group is great. You have great leadership in the front office. I think that they can continue on this, but it's just not as guaranteed as it is with Sean Payton on the sideline.
Well, you know what? Maybe you don't try to replace him. Maybe he's one of those folks that's irreplaceable and you start over. But I'm going to say, if he's watching, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Because I feel like I'm the layman that doesn't know a whole lot about what goes on in the field of the X's and the O's. So I'm going to remove myself from the conversation and turn it over to Doug Mouton so that you two can talk inside baseball and talk Saints.
Yeah, look, Nick, let me ask you this. I assume we still have Nick, right? Because, Karen, you brought this up about Sean Payton's level of autonomy in this organization, which is really unusual in modern pro sports. Sean Payton made every decision for this team, every free agent decision, every budgetary decision. This team in every way ran through Sean Payton in a way that other NFL teams do not run right now. Nick, is it your take that whoever takes over for Sean Payton, that maybe Mickey Loomis is going to have more control than he had with Payton, and that this will become more of a team effort than led by one? And look, I'm not saying it was wrong with Sean Payton running it. Obviously, the Saints won a lot of games in the last 16 years. But would you guess that the next coach will not have quite the same level of autonomy that Payton had?
I think that the next person, if they do end up having that level of control that he had, they'll earn it over time. I don't think it's something that you walk into and you hand them Sean Payton's reins. I think, like you said, Mickey Loomis takes a grip on him. And look, I wonder what they're going to do moving forward. Does Mickey Loomis move up at this point and become more of a presidential figure in Jeff Ireland, or Kai Harley moves into a general manager role? I think it's an opportunity to kind of look at everything you're doing, tinker and rebuild it, or restructure it rather, for the move forward. Because if you remember, when Sean Payton, it was 2017 or 20, back when he did one of his contracts, he tried to get a clause in there that he was tied to Mickey Loomis. And as long as Mickey Loomis was the general manager, he was under contract. And if anything ever happened to Mickey, it would void his contract. The league obviously didn't allow that. That language isn't allowed to be in contracts. But I think Mickey being in this role as long as he's been is to do with Sean Payton, and that he wanted him in that role. And I think Jeff Ireland was the assistant GM just because that's the structure that Sean was comfortable with. You take Sean out, it's a chance to look at everything. So I think there's going to be a lot of different changes. A lot of things are going to be different moving forward with the way they run this team.
Yeah, and I did not mean that as a criticism of the way the organization was structured, because clearly this is what worked. And Mickey Loomis has done a brilliant job of maneuvering the salary cap every year when we think the Saints can't go get free agents, and all of a sudden they do have money to do it. Loomis has done a brilliant job with that. I in no way meant that as a criticism when I said Payton had that kind of autonomy, because he had earned it, and clearly it led to a lot of wins. I would just expect more of a normal structure going forward. But, and look, I know you talked about Dennis Allen. That really did precipitate this having to come out today. Dennis Allen interviewing in Chicago, and I'm not saying Dennis Allen is the Saints' next head coach, but certainly you want all of your options on the table. And even if Sean Payton had waited one more day, when I say Sean Payton, I mean Sean Payton and the Saints, if they had waited one more day, you might have missed out on Dennis Allen. If he gets offered the Bears job and takes it, you might have missed out on him. So really, once we knew Dennis Allen was interviewing in Chicago, this sort of had to happen. We had to get a Payton decision today. Is that your read too, Nick?
I think it was important. The longer this lingers on, the more likely it is that you start losing guys that you want to keep. And secondary coach Chris Richard is going to be interviewing in Pittsburgh soon too. If Dennis Allen moves up, Richard would be one of the two guys, I think, along with Ryan Nielsen, that you would look at internally to take the place of Allen as defensive coordinator. So if they didn't make a decision and this thing just starts lingering on and Payton steps away 2 weeks from now, by then all the guys that you would want to take on and lead this organization could have been in other places. So yeah, I agree 100%. This needed to happen now. And I think even beyond Dennis Allen, you just need to be able to run your process. There's teams like the Bears that are starting to hire people. Right now they hired their general manager today. Jeff Ireland had interviewed for that job, so he'll be staying put, at least as far as the Bears are concerned. But they hired their GM, so the coach is going to come next. So that means the candidates out of the field. And if the Saints want to cast a wide net, you have to be able to look at everybody. And I don't think Sean Payton has any ill will or wanted to put the team in any position where they aren't in the best position to move forward. So he needed to come to a decision as quickly as possible so that they could move forward and not miss out on their guys.
That's right. And it has not delayed too long now. All of the candidates, excuse me, that you would have hoped were out there are still out there. So the Saints will have their choice of the full field. Look, Nick, you and I both got into our professions because we love watching football. I mean, that was the first reason both you decided to do what you do and I decided to do what I do, is because we find football fun. New Orleans, as a community, finds football enormously fun. The TV ratings back that up. This is a football-driven city, a football-driven state. Try as best you can to describe how much fun it has been to watch sort of the evolution and the development of Sean Payton's offensive football since you've been covering it.
It's amazing. I mean, it's a fluidity of offense that I don't think you see a lot of places around the league, and just the way that he creates and does different things. And, most recently, just even the Taysom Hill concept of offense and all the things they were able to do with him, and the 3-level passing concepts, and just how open he was always able to get guys. Guys like Willie Snead becoming 1,000-yard receivers, that doesn't happen other places. That happened because of Sean Payton's brain and the way he was able to design offense, and really how fluid it was and how easy it was for them to play has made the last 2 years feel like the drag that they kind of are. And it kind of makes it a lot easier to understand why we're sitting here right now talking about this, because you felt the weight of that offense getting dragged down and doing things that were out of character, and things being so rough for them. It's shocking in the juxtaposition. And, I think that, his impact on the game, it's hard to really put it into words, just how much he really changed offenses, even things like big slot receivers that you see people doing around the league, and it's just taken for granted. Now, when he started out doing that with Marcus Colston, other teams weren't playing the position like that. And the stuff that he does with tight ends, the battle between Jimmy Graham being a tight end or a wide receiver, that seems ridiculous now with the way that teams use tight ends. They were at the forefront of that and having the vision of moving a guy around like that, or the satellite back. Marshall Faulk obviously started out. Sean Payton kind of took that position to the next level and made it an instrumental part of his offense. and you see that proliferate throughout the league. And just so many of his ideas have been influential other places. In his stamp on this game, it's there, and there's no question about how much he's meant to the NFL and obviously to New Orleans football.
Yeah, a little earlier, Nick, I brought up how he used 3 running backs in the Super Bowl run of 2009, which was unheard of. Before then, teams had 1 running back they would ride and then a backup. The Saints used 3 different running backs, all in a different role, and now it's commonplace around the NFL. At one point, you did something where you studied his formations. I remember you telling me at one point during a game, this is a formation we've never seen before. His use of personnel packages and formations, while now you see it in a game and it seems normal. It's like I try to explain to my daughter 2001: A Space Odyssey, and like nothing looked, space movies didn't look like that until that movie came out. And it's almost like that with Sean Payton. Now all of the things he implemented seem so commonplace, but if you go back in time, there's so much of modern offensive football that he began.
Yeah, even the personnel package is just how many guys play in a game. Like you said, the 3 running backs, but it's that at every position. And it almost looks like a fire drill in between snaps, just the guys coming in and out. It's like a NASCAR pit crew just working quickly. But when they started doing that, it was outrageous, and it kind of kept defenses completely on their heels. And they kind of brought about that a sense of almost hurry up offense without actually playing hurry up offense, just with how many guys were coming in and out and trying to match up with them and creating those mismatches. And there's just so many little things that over the days we're going to look back on the things that Sean did that over time just kind of became part of the fabric and normal. But when you start pulling them out, so many different things they did in his impact on offense throughout the league. I think it puts him on the cusp of being a Hall of Famer, even if he never coaches again. I kind of feel like we probably will see him coach again at some point. But even right now, just with 1 Super Bowl ring and his influence on modern NFL offense, puts him on the cusp. And there's not a lot of guys with just 1 Super Bowl that are even in that conversation. And I think he would have a good chance of getting in right now.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. Now, look, you touched on it briefly. And look, we do not know the answer to this question, so this is conjecture. What do you expect Sean Payton to do in the immediate future? And I'm guessing you're going to say he'll be on a network this coming football season. How long do you expect him to stay out of football? Sean Payton and I are the same age, both 58 years old. I would expect Payton, because I can tell you I'm nowhere near feeling like I want to retire. I would suspect Payton take a year or 2 or 3 away. I definitely suspect him to coach again. Would you make that same assumption?
I think we're going to see him go away for a little bit, be on TV, maybe even be in a booth during games. I think he would be great at that. And then, like you said, I think a few years down the road, we do see him back in coaching. You know, as odd as it is somebody that's as defined by the game. And I do think that he needs it in his life, but I think he's somebody that would be okay away from it for a while. And I think that he's somebody that would be able to find fulfillment doing other football adjacent things that aren't necessarily coaching. Whereas some guys, I don't know that they would be able to find that fulfillment. But I think Sean has enough interest and he's intellectually curious about enough things that he could possibly find another path and just keep walking it forever. But I do think that competitor in him at some point is going to want to come back. It's going to want to coach. And, you know, hopefully for the Saints, that is within the next couple of years, because they would get some draft compensation if he wanted to go coach somewhere else. But I do think that we will see him back on a sideline one day.
Nick Underhill, we sincerely appreciate your time. Saints announcement coming later this afternoon. Sean Payton stepping down. Nick tweeted it out much earlier today. Nick, thank you for your time. We'll see you later. Okay, Karen Swenson, I think that wraps it up for me. Look, I totally get where Sean Payton is coming from. I think all of us, after hurricanes we've been through, any of us who lived through Katrina, we all understand what it's like to feel burnt out. He went through a lot this season. It's been 16 years in the same job. I certainly get it. Personally, I would say I have nothing but appreciation for amazing football to watch and to cover. I mean, it's been a pleasure for me, and I don't have any other word for it. I think Nick said it best. Sean Payton brought relevance to New Orleans, to the Saints, in a way that we needed after Katrina psychologically. And he will always, or should always, have a good piece in everybody's heart who's from around here. Karen.
Oh my goodness, I think you're right. I do hope he's watching, because I hope he feels the collective hug that New Orleans is wrapping around him, and really the whole Gulf South, because that is the whole team. I do understand that we're going to hear more. I was texting with Gail Benson, owner of the Saints, and she said they are preparing a press conference for 3 p.m. It is 1:23 now, so we'll learn a lot more at that time. But our sources, Doug Mouton, Nick Underhill, all saying that Sean Payton will be stepping down. And we are joined now by the voice of the Saints, our former colleague, dear friend, Mike Haas. Mike, when did you find out? What was your initial thought?
Well, when it started leaking Sunday, I didn't give it a whole lot of thought, but by Monday it was so kind of rampant, and last I checked, today's Tuesday, so that's insanity. I saw it on Twitter, my phone just started going bzz, 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 and I was like, I'm not that popular, so I knew it was big news. And I'm just stunned at the speed of which it happened, because now granted, he has been thinking about this probably behind the scenes prior to anything being released or leaked by anybody else in the networks on Sunday. But then it's still surprising. It's just still surprising. And believe me, as Coach Payton said in a recent interview, nothing surprised me anymore. Nothing. I mean, nothing can make us go, oh my gosh, but this is one of the few things it did after the football season that they've been through. Even when he missed the game from coaching, like missed that game because he had COVID, we were like, oh, okay. And like we moved on. We were so numb at that point. But man, this is stunning.
Let me ask you about his future. It's been speculated that maybe he'll go behind the mic, and nobody is more familiar with what that takes than you, having done it on television, now on radio. Doug was talking about just how articulate he is, and Nick was talking about how he can take complex, football jargon, for lack of a better word, and make it understandable for the average fan. What do you think he would bring to the table if, in fact, he were to choose a path that took him into the media?
If he goes that route, I think he'll be great. I think it'll take some time. I think when you hear media members say that, it's when we are lucky enough to really kind of hear him talk, not necessarily off the record, but when you hear him kind of talking football or tell a story or something like that. Because for the most part, he is a very measured, guarded, cautious. When he gives a press conference, everything has a reason or a meaning. But yet, you will hear times when he'll tell a story, and it is, man, you're just glued to your seat. So I think he's got that it factor. Bringing it out and kind of getting past the guarded stage might take a little time, but he's the kind of guy that is never going to not kind of be successful. Whatever it takes, whatever they tell him to do, whatever it needs, I think he'll do it. I think if that's the route that he wants to go, and we don't know, it's all speculation, I think he'll be fine. It's finding the right niche. It's finding the right partner for him. Troy Aikman and Buck, they've all, if you look at the great teams over the decades, it's all been about the relationship and the partner. But I think he'll be great.
Well, given that, and we were hearing earlier from Nick Underhill that Fox and Amazon had approached him to perhaps, join their ranks behind the mic. But I'm thinking of Drew Brees, and when you're talking about partnerships, those two guys have a great one.
That would be interesting. I'm not sure who would be. That would be a booth of, because somebody would be doing the play-by-play, and you'd have those two as kind of your analysts, so to speak. But man, Monday Night Football did it for years. I'd love to see those two kind of be sitting next to each other and hearing some of the stories and some of the ins and outs. That would be awesome. And put them in a booth together. Forget a football game. Just put them in a booth together. Let them. Maybe that's a studio show. Who knows? I don't know. But again, you put Drew Brees and Sean Payton together in any situation where hard work is involved and success is involved, those two are pretty much going to come out on top.
And I was saying earlier to me, when, and don't know a whole heck of a lot about the X's and the O's, but I know what he's meant to the city. And I remember what he did in 06 and then again in 09 winning the Super Bowl. You were there and you've been there over all these years. Talk about how, you know, the Saints, just the way in which the city has embraced the team and how he has led not only the team, but the city on this road to recovery that, quite frankly, we've been asked to walk over and over and over again, whether it was the oil spills or the various hurricanes, et cetera.
Well, I think when people talk about Sean Payton, we immediately go back to what? We begin in 2006. To me, it begins in 04 and 05. Katrina, we're coming out of Katrina, and the Saints had struggled under Jim Haslett, fired Jim Haslett. So I was like, I was not working weekends. I said, I'm going to become a season ticket holder in 2006. This is before Sean Payton had been hired, before anything. I was like, it's something. It's almost for the community. We should all go get tickets. And I called the Saints to get season tickets, and they had at that time in 2005. This is January or February of 2006. We had just turned the calendar, and they had roughly 35,000 empty season tickets. You could sit anywhere you wanted. Anywhere. The building, I could have run a play if I'd have asked to. They're like, where do you want to sit? And so in that time span to 5 years later, we had a double-digit waiting list. But we forget when he came in post-2005. We just jumped to 2006. In 05, the building was hurting for fans, coming off of those tough times. Katrina, for gosh sakes. And I don't know if we can ever put any kind of figure or any kind of demonstrative impact on those first 3 games of 2006. People, again, when we think 2006, we go right to the Atlanta game.
Yeah.
That was the 3rd game of the season. They played 2 games on the road. They had no preseason games at home because of Katrina, and they won both games. And so for me, Sean Payton did something that I didn't think was possible in Drew Brees in that 2016, is that I became a fan again. I sat in my seat. I didn't sit in the press box, and I became a fan. And it was the greatest time from 06 all the way through 2017. I was a season ticket holder. I was just a fan. He brought me back to the game and made it fun. And that place was electric and respectable. And now we're spoiled.
Yeah.
Like, that's what we think should happen each year. But what happened from 05 to 06 is magical. So, that was 10-6 NFC Championship, but it could have been Super Bowl, and who knows?
Well, you said it started really in 04 or 05, and now here we are in 2022. You've covered him from the beginning until now, the end of his coaching career, at least presumably. If you had to sum up in a word what his legacy is, I asked this of Nick Underhill earlier. I'm not going to tell you the word he chose. What would yours be?
Instinct.
Wow.
He had great instinct. They had a great feel for the city, had a great instinct for what was good, had a great instinct for who we were as a people, had a great instinct for Drew Brees, had a great instinct for offense. He got us. Wow. And not everybody gets us. He had a great instinct, and he got us.
And Nick Underhill said relevancy. And Doug, I didn't ask him the specific word, but he talked a lot about his innovation. And I appreciate your perspective. And thank you so much. And we'll be making sure that we get your thoughts post 3 p.m. press conference, I'm quite sure. I know that you'll be on the radio as well. But thank you, Mike Haas, for sharing your thoughts on the imminent departure of Sean Payton as head coach of the Saints. I'm going to say this. I'm just getting a text now from Bobby Hebert. This is his quote. "I think this is a short-term retirement. I believe in a year or 2 he will get back into coaching or keep doing TV." So how about that? Sean Payton, if you're watching, we love you. We thank you. We wish you the best in your well-deserved retirement. We hope it is a short one and that we see you again soon at 3 p.m., an hour and a half from now. According to Mrs. Gail Benson, the owner, they will be holding a press conference, and we will learn a lot more, both about the reasons behind his departure and what he has coming up for his future. We wish him the very best. Thank you for joining us for this. All right, we're going to go back and return you to your regular programming. We'll see you at 3.
This has been breaking news from Channel 4's Eyewitness News. For the latest updates, go to WWLTV.com, the Channel 4 app, or our social media pages.